Welcome to those who are online. Thanks for sticking with us. IMS is blessed with being able to call on lots of experts, and I think that was, don't snigger in the corner here, Mr. Wyatt. And I think that was really well demonstrated this morning. I've got to say, I found this morning really interesting. I've read a lot. And now we're going to move in and talk about stability, which is kind of a quite important topic. And Bill's a naval architect of some standing. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. How would you like to leave the WhatsApp? So delighted to welcome Bill, and he's going to talk about stability. He asked me where to pitch this, and I said, well, we've got a mixed bag of experience in the room, so I'm going to leave that to you to determine where you pitch it. But anyway, Bill, over to you. Thanks very much for giving up your time.
As I said to Mike, I don't know where to pitch this, and I suspect some of you here will know probably more about this than I do. So I am trying to do this as stability without numbers, without atoms, but the ideas and what to look for, especially what to look for in a GZ curve, and what information it will tell you about the boat, because you get to see these curves, and very often you don't necessarily know what they mean and what the particular figures that are used in terms mean in practice. And
check the microphone quick. It's not working.
There's a red light on there for mute. Does that make any difference?
It's coming through.
Another test.
Yeah. I think.
Hello. There we go.
I think it's that wobbly cable there. But
Seems to be moving again now. Okay. Should be fine. Sorry about that.
Right. Well, as I say, I didn't know quite where to pitch this, and so you'll tell me either if this is at the right level, or too basic, or too advanced. But I hope it provides some assistance into what the whole stability regime is and why things are as they are. Right. In any of these calculations or any of these things, it is just static stability that we're talking about. For high-speed craft, the whole question of dynamic stability is a completely different area, and not dealing with it. Essentially, anytime you see stability in any of the literature, it will be static stability. It will be considering as if the water's flat and the boat is sitting there and not moving, and external forces are applied to it to make it behave in a certain way. It does more or less work, and has been found in many years to be pretty good for what's going on, but it is just essentially a static case that you're always looking at. So where do you find stability information, and what is it, and what does it mean? And essentially what I'll be mostly looking at is what it means. Where you find the stability information for a particular vessel, what you're likely to have are the RCD, RCR, just the simple whether it has passed a particular standard. That is, at the moment, the most likely thing you're going to find. But there are then the question of what that is and what in the end it means. So for the RCR, the Recreational Craft Directive, there are the 3 standards that are mostly where you'll find it, although for the small inflatable boats, by and large, it tends to be in the ISO 6185 for them, but that is not something I'm going to look into at all. But that is one area that that is where a certain amount of stability work has been done to. So that's a typical sort of form for a biggish, well, Veneto. And from that, you will see that it is, well, Cat A for 8, Cat B for 9, and then 12 for the others, persons on board. But the bit that actually says is that line there, where the stability information has been applied to the standard of 12217-2. So that is about all you're likely to find for a vessel like that, but it has passed that standard. And that's the equation for sticks, which is hidden within the standard for sailing boats. And the only things I would sort of bring out for that is that the biggest factor in all of that is the length of the boat. That has the overwhelming effect on whether you have a high sticks number or a low sticks number. For a small boat to get a Cat A or B rating is hard, because the biggest factor there is the length of the boat. The base, twice the waterline length plus the hull length divided by 3. So it is essentially the length of the boat is the big factor, and that goes into that, which gives you the sticks number. The factor then is all of these other things. So it is getting one number from a number of other factors that produce you things like the dynamic stability factor. It is still using static numbers, static stability. But all of these other things, the inversion recovery factor to do with angle of vanishing stability and other things, and knockdown recovery factor, all of these other things are influence the number, but by far the biggest thing is the length.
Can I just ask what the stakes?
Okay, that is the stability index, which is used, stability index, and that is used within ISO 12217. I can never remember which number it is, -2. The one used for sailing vessels, and that is the number that will, it comes out as a single number, and it tells you it is that number which is used in other places to determine the thing. But and the other thing, the other one, it stops if I can move can I move this?
Yeah, just put it to the
out of the way. There we go. Yeah, sticks is that. Stops, it was the RYA one, was the RYA scheme before that. And that was sail training operational scheme. Nobody ever knows what these acronyms are supposed to mean. And it's rather got lost in the mists of time. But this was used by the RYA and the Royal Ocean Racing Club, again, to give a screening number for sailing boats. But again, it works on a very similar thing. It is a series of factors which are multiplied together to produce one number. It's not bad, but again, the the overriding thing that is whether you have something that is considered a stable or an unstable sailing boat, in this case, is the size. And whereas these other factors to do with beam and displacement all have factors, but again, the overwhelming thing for this sort of scheme will be the length of the boat that determines how stable or otherwise it is considered. One thing I would say for stops is it is rather a black box solution. You plug in the numbers and the answer comes out at the bottom. One thing to do is to make sure that you are measuring the correct things if you do have to do a stops calculation or anything like that, and look at all the information to determine what is required. As far as the actual calculations are concerned, it is really a sort of black box thing. You plug in the numbers at the top, the answers come out at the bottom, and to understand precisely what's going on, it takes a bit of effort to dig into it, so I wouldn't worry. But again, with any of these things, it is about measuring the right things if you are required to do something like a stops calculation in order to for coding purposes. It is there are places to find this information, but the one thing is it is the drafts and the thing are taken at an eighth of the total beam, the thing, away from the center line. Well, MGN 280 and other coding things, this I just put together the sort of basic things with this. This is just more to say that really this is completely opaque. I mean, it doesn't, when you look at it like this as just words, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The area under the right and lever curve should not be less than 0.055 meter radians up to 30 degrees angle, and a heel not less than 0.09 meter radians up to 40 degrees angle heel, or the angle of down flooding if that angle is less. That as a phrase doesn't mean a lot, but I hope to, as we go along, explain a bit more about what these various things are and what they mean in terms of the real world, in practical terms for the boat on which you're looking at. Again, these things are all written there in the 11.3.6, and they don't of themselves mean a great deal. And then the multi-hull form is even worse, and it has definitely been taken from a different place. The terms they use are slightly different. The nomenclature they use is slightly different from the paragraph that's above. But that is just to say it is there in there, and I'll try and go on and explain what these things mean if that's any help. Right. Okay. So from the naval architecture point of view, this is your standard hull, your standard boat it's basically a cargo ship, which is what is draw with a flat bottom, turner bilge, and parallel sides. And the various points you look at on the central line is K, which is the keel, B, which is the center of buoyancy, then G, which is the center of gravity, and M, which is the metacenter, which I will come on to shortly. But those are the 4 points in a vertical, and when the boat's at rest, as statics, no external forces on it, they will all be in a straight line. They will all be vertically above one another. And then you might have come across terms like KB, KM, GM and kg. And so for this, for BM is the metacentric radius, which is the distance between the central point C and the metacenter. That is something which is used in terms of calculations, especially with the inclining experiment and other things like that. That is a useful figure. The GM is the metacentric height, the initial metacentric height, which is one of the requirements listed in that MGN 280. It is your initial metacentric height. And the kg is the vertical center of gravity, how high the center of gravity is above the keel. And then kb, the vertical center of buoyancy, how far the center of buoyancy is above the keel. And it is those four that are the sort of useful positions to know, the useful terminology to use within these things. And the other thing to point out is if you have the two letters together, it just means the distance between those 2 points. And that is the thing to remember. So if there are, so when talking about stability, if it is GN, it is the distance from G, the center of gravity, to M, the metacenter. If it is kg, then that is the vertical center of gravity. That is the distance between the keel, which is normally your reference point. Sometimes it isn't, but it is usually your reference point. And in general, that means you've just got positive numbers always for that. They're always going upwards. So from this static, stable ship with no external forces on it, we then go along and we put some external force on the ship. We heel it over. What happens here is, for the sake of simplicity, we always assume that the center of gravity is still in the same place. It might have moved, but it generally, well, for various reasons, it can move, yeah. But in this case, we assume it isn't. And what we can say is that we now have a new center of buoyancy. That whole hull, the center of buoyancy is now in a different place from where it was with the static hull. And we can draw a line straight up from that new center of buoyancy. And where that crosses the center line, we call the metacenter. That is effectively where the hull rotates around in terms of things. It works on small angles, especially with slab-sided vessels. As soon as you start to get more shape, that metacenter moves around. But for the sake of simplicity, we assume a parallel-sided boat, a parallel-sided ship, boat, vessel, and that metacenter is always then above the new center of buoyancy, above the center of buoyancy. And as you know from Archimedes, we have our buoyant force is equal to our mass, the force due to gravity. They're both equal. And if we now draw a point horizontal to the center of gravity, we get the position that is called Z. And it is that GZ curve that I think you probably will have seen. So that is the righting lever. And it is almost always the righting lever that you're talking about, rather than the righting moment. The righting moment will be equal to the displacement multiplied by the righting lever. In most cases, you just deal with the lever and don't worry about the moment. The other point that you will find is N sometimes. And you, in some stability booklets, you will come across a table of KNs. And KN is useful because from Kn and Kg, you can work out Gz. That is, if you're having to produce a new set of conditions from a stability book without a model attached to it, you just have the stability book data. And having a table of Kns is extremely useful. It makes your life a lot easier, especially with a spreadsheet. To be able to go from Kns to Gz and produce a curve is quite straightforward then. So essentially, I mean, I think these are things you understand that that as far as the catamaran is concerned, the reason it stays upright is because due to the form of it, that there's buoyancy over here and there's buoyancy over there, and as you start to move it, you lose buoyancy from one side and gain buoyancy from another, and the center of gravity is always in the middle. For a small case of narrow sailing boats, they can be just stable because of their ballast, because their ballast is so low down in an external bulb keel that is what will keep them upright. Mostly boats are somewhere in between. That there is a certain amount of form stability and a certain amount of ballast. Certainly for sailing boats and for monohull sailing boats, and it is that will maintain the stability. So a narrow, heavily ballast boat has different characteristics from a relatively shallow, flat, broad beam boat, which relies more on that movement of the buoyancy from side to side to keep it upright. And in order to work out the stability from the sort of naval architect point of view, you need two pieces of information. You want to know the shape of the hull, which usually comes from lines plan from design information. You can lift that from a hull, but that is a painful exercise and one to be avoided if at all possible. And otherwise, it is knowing where the center of gravity is. And that is usually, well, it can be done by calculation if you've got accurate building data, but that is not usually the case. But it is more likely to go by an inclining experiment, inclining test later on. So here is my example heavily ballasted boat. If we put a waterline on there, nice waterline, and say that the center of buoyancy is about there, and the center of gravity is somewhere there, it might be higher, might be lower, and then we put buoyancy up, acting through there, the weight of the hull is the same and acting down. So if we now heel this boat, then with some external force, then the center of buoyancy will have moved a little bit from where it was downhill, and the center of gravity is there. So you have buoyancy there and gravity there. And that is then your righting moment, the distance between those two lines. If you push it a bit more, then that gets bigger and smaller. So, and that is the sort of GZ curve you will see for a sort of a conventional, well, heavily ballasted. This is an ideal boat. So carry on for this and look at the, so yes, the GZ max is up there. In this case, it is at 90 degrees because that is where the maximum righting lever will occur. And the angle of vanishing stability in this case is at 180 degrees. There is no point for this boat where it is stable upside down. in theory, it will always return to the vertical position. There will always be a lever to return it to the vertical position if it is inverted. At 180 degrees, it is the lever is 0, but any small amount of force will push it upright. In the case of the catamaran, this is about the point where you have the greatest righting moment from the external force. All of your buoyancy is in one hull, and your center of gravity is somewhere over there. So you have your buoyancy there, and your mass acting there, and weight acting there downwards. But if you heal it a bit more, then the distance between B and G, between your gravity and your center of buoyancy, decreases. And this is a GZ curve for that notional catamaran. The things that I would point out for in this are, yes, your GZ max is at a comparatively small angle. For a catamaran, that will be as soon as that one hull lifts out of the water. That is where you get your greatest righting moment. The angle of vanishing stability in this case is about 62 degrees. Here, the vertical center of gravity is above the midpoint of the hulls, is above the hulls, which is fairly normal for catamaran. The other thing to point out here is that it is more stable upside down than it is the right way up, and that is something that we understand with catamarans, that if you do manage to capsize a catamaran, it takes an awful lot to get it back the right way. And the area in that above the line and below the line is the amount of energy required to turn it over. So at the point of vanishing stability, it can go either way. If it is sort of pulled back to the right way, then do that. But if it's pushed the other way, then. But I think the key points to point out for this is the curve is very steep to start off with, which is what we also understand with catamarans, that they are very stiff, that they feel very stable when you get on, that they do feel that way. But as I said, once it gets beyond that point where that one hull has just left the water, then the righting lever will go down, though it will still want to come back. But if you keep applying the same amount of force, then it will go over. And this is a typical, sort of a typical GZ curve that I found somewhere. This is more the sort of thing you will find for a normal type of boat. The odd thing here is that if you notice, it doesn't start at 0. That there is a slight you will need a slight amount of force to get this particular vessel to an even keel, and that is very unusual to see on a GZ curve in a stability book or elsewhere. But in that case, it's quite common in practice, because most of the time your boats will not be sitting on an even keel, that there will be an imbalance. It's an imbalance usually in weight or loading most of the time. It can be that your boat is not symmetrical, that it is but otherwise, this is a fairly typical curve for some types of boat that you'll come across. And yeah, the GZ max is up there, angle of vanishing stability there around 68 degrees, and that is an angle of list rather than an angle of roll. And so for the MGN 280 requirements, it often talks about the area up to a certain figure. And the area under the curve up to 30 degrees is equivalent to the amount of energy involved in pushing the vessel over to 30 degrees. And similarly, 40 degrees is another line, and it will often be at that point where the GZ, the righting lever is coming down, and it is another measure of how stable the boat is, especially at larger angles of field. Okay. Now this is a curve of an actual boat that is out there sailing about, and it is one that is used for long distance, for sort of deep ocean voyages. It has been modelled in this case with the superstructure, and the way you can tell that generally are by the bumps in the curve, that it isn't entirely smooth, and that there are a few bumps around sort of 40-degree mark, which is generally some decade immersion and so on. Here the GZ max is just before 80 degrees, and there is no area at which it is stable upside down. It has a positive righting moment right the way around to 180 degrees. It should, in theory, come upright from rolling with no problems. But because it is modelled by computer, and so what you are looking at there is a perfect superstructure that will remain intact whilst you roll it. So this is all, as I said before, theory, flat water, perfect conditions. That is what you're looking at here. In this case, this is another boat that is used for long voyages, and here the angle of vanishing stability is above 120 degrees, so it is still a long way. You notice here that the area under the curve, under the GZ curve above the line, is quite large, and the area below it is comparatively small. So this should, in those sort of conditions, there should be enough energy to right it from an inversion. However, it is still stable upside down. This has got a beamier shape and is different from the one here, which is more of the traditional long distance cruiser shape with narrow and so on. Sometimes the curve can surprise you when you do the numbers. In this case, yes, the angle of vanishing stability is down at about 45 degrees. It's a boat that feels relatively stable, quite a big boat. However, it really has not got the reserve of stability once you start getting beyond, well, yes, beyond about 25 degrees, it starts to decrease and is again very stable upside down. Okay. I will just go very quickly through the inclining experiment, which is the other thing that once you've got the shape of the hull, this is what is used to determine where the vertical center of gravity is within the boat. It is it's going to be a very quick dash through this. It is probably better called the inclining test, as it isn't really an experiment. It is just a stability test, but for it to work, you need the stability information to go with it. It is not something that is any use on its own without hydrostatic information. So there are other sort of more practical that are heel tests and so on, which would normally be carried out for small craft purposes. But as I say, there's probably just a very quick run through this, because what you're looking at here is what you want to do is provide what is a perfect couple applied to get that answer. So what you're trying to do is apply a torque to the hull, and in order to do that, you do that by moving weights. But you've got to think of it as is that what you now have is a hull with the weights on it, and that is your boat, that is your system. And then by moving the weights from side to side and then measuring the heel, all you're doing is applying a twist to the hull while keeping it otherwise the same, is what you're trying to do by that. And from these, you then generally get a line of points to give you the position, to give you a figure from which you can work out the position of the vertical center of gravity. I don't know how. 10, 15 minutes, okay, right. So if you do need to do it, then go into that. Now that is one ship I did do an inclining experiment on, and that was the first one I actually needed a crane and concrete weights, and that was the second one I did an inclining test on, where I needed a crane and concrete weights. So more usually it is done with hand weights, but you can use other things available. Right. So I know it's been a very quick run through. Are there any questions? Anything you want me to look at in more detail, or anything I've skated over a bit rapidly there?
The weight of a person.
Weight of a person?
When you use people, I know there's been a big debate about this because we've all got bigger and larger
We have.
and fatter. And the rules have changed a bit.
Well, Yes, I mean, the 75 kilogram person is still being used. The 82.5 is a possibility. And you can, for your calculations, use bigger people. And it is probably safe to do it, I would think, but
Find everybody into fire.
I feel a bit bad about that. Yes.
When doing the incline test,
Yeah.
I've worked alongside and they hung a plumb bolt on the centre line.
Yes.
They've also used a laser level to, you know, so they put some masking tape on the floorboard.
Yeah.
Hung it that, and then we moved 56-pound weights to
Yeah.
various parts of the boat.
Yes,
And then
yeah.
marked it, and then
Yeah.
that information was put into the chart to the side factors to effectively twisting the boat. And this one here,
Yeah. I mean,
what I was trying the question really was,
Yeah, sure.
if you had any difference between, say, the port side midships and the starboard side midships, and you measured it in, you know, measured in the same back from the stem, you know, you had difference in readings, would that indicate that there's a difference in stability on different tacks, or would it be, or is the hull unsymmetrical, or could it just be that there's some fuel tank in one side and buoyancy?
there can be various reasons why. In general, I find that by the time you put the things in, the line is pretty good. I haven't found that having any sort of a list is difficult to deal with, because you often either trim it out with the weights before you start, or you generally just ignore it because you're dealing with the difference between the two marks on your thing, and as long as they come back to the same point in the middle, you generally don't worry about it not being exactly square, often because you can't find, you're not necessarily sure which parts of the boat are horizontal to start off with, or which part of the ship.
I've had them where the line doesn't quite go through the intersection.
Oh yeah.
Where, so that means the boat's already going to list.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't go through the middle, then in general, all you're looking at is the slope of the the slope of the line. This is about getting an average for what you're doing, and I generally use two pendulums and a digital inclinometer. I haven't tried it with a laser level. I'm trying to think how exactly I can see how you could do it, because but I don't think mine's got quite the angle between because I think it would hit its stops before it did anything. But there are other ways of doing it. You can do it with manometers. I've never tried. I tend to just use garden trough, plumb bob, and if it's wobbling about too much in the water, a bit of wallpaper paste is the thing to increase the viscosity of the.
There's some questions on there, actually.
Okay.
These up for you. There's a few chat questions.
Okay, good.
clients.
Right, Andrew says, been working on aluminium yacht with corrosion. Not sure is that a stability question? No, that isn't a stability question.
It is, yeah.
Is it? Okay, aluminium yacht with a significant corrosion inside the water tank reduces the whole plating. Looking at moving tanks elsewhere is very difficult to access and repair original tank. Is it correct that we can only vary the moment of the new tanks against CG in each of the 3 dimensions compared to the existing tank by 5% re ISO standards that you mentioned?
I don't think so. I think the 5% is generally the growth margin that gets put in, that you would generally add 5% of your lightship at the weather deck as a margin for growth. I don't know. I can't imagine you'd be moving the VCG that much by moving your tanks away from the shell plating and inside. Presumably it would be a reduction in the size of the tanks as well, unless they were going somewhere completely different. So I don't know is probably the answer to that, and I don't know. I would have thought it's probably not. How practical is it to throw up a SIB for a pre-RCD multi-hull with no drawings? It depends what sort of SIB you're after, because the multi-hull SIBs for coding are very different from a normal monohull SIB, and I mean, it's always possible to do these things, but it is again, it does depend on what information you have available, and yeah, I'm not. Well, with a multi-hull, it's going to be a multi-hull SIB is a very different beast from a monohull one, and again, it depends on what information you have available. Brochure info only. I don't know. I think that's a more open-ended question in terms of that would
Because I've done 2 stability books from multi-hull without the drawings using yeah, so I could let them know what I think.
Jonathan Massey.
Yeah.
Jonathan Massey.
Jonathan Massey.
Jonathan Massey.
All right.
Dave, could we take a note to connect Jonathan with Diana,
Yeah, sure.
please?
Mhm.
By email. Thank you. Okay, any other questions?
No, we have.
Dry old subject, isn't it?
It is a dry subject. It is
Kind of important. Yeah.
interesting.
Any more for you? Okay, Bill, thank you very
Well,
much.
not at all.
Lovely to see you.
See, yeah.
Actually, Bill's just agreed over lunch to join the IONS Certifying Operating Committee, so which is good news. So thank you, Bill. You'll never regret it. You won't regret it.
No.
Right, fabulous.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. That's yours, by the way.
Right.
So let me give you that. Are you off or are you hanging around or?
I think that probably will